Over 1 million teachers use iExcel in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? iExcel is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. iExcel gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, iExcel has decades of expertise and has proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across nearly 50 states show that those who use iExcel outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit iexcel.com/PM to learn more.
You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Monday Matters. Jen, we are recording this one to come out, well, pretty close to the time we're recording it. Here we are in the middle of July. And I'm just going to tell you, I want to talk about one of your recent newsletters in this Monday Matters, but I also want to hear about gelato. How was Italy?
So I set a goal to eat gelato every day, and I did not eat gelato every day, but I made up for it and had gelato twice a day, a couple of days. So I got the equivalent of gelato every day. It was incredible. We were 3 days in Italy and then 9 in Greece. And somebody asked me today, what did you love about it? And I said, I don't know how to answer that. It's like saying, what do you love about life, right? There's so many, I don't know, the scenery, the twinkle lights, the dancing, the food, the ancient history. And one thing I love, Will, is etymology. I love learning about where words came from. And, so many of our language came from the Roman or Greek ancestors. I'll just highlight one. We were in Delphi and our tour guide shared with us that the word melody came from the idea and the word sweet song. And, the usage of a sweet song, it's a melody. So I love that. I ate it up, but we had a wonderful trip and gelato was consumed.
Well, I know you and I are both avid readers, and part of the thing I've loved about traveling overseas is you feel like you are in a story, like you're finally in those settings you've read so much about, and there's just something beautiful about transporting yourself in your imagination to places you've not been. But then going in person, there's just nothing like it, Jen.
Right.
And
And one of I'm going to make a tie to leadership here with this, but one of our tour guides actually validated one of the things about me as a reader and a traveler. I always, I try to read up on a place before I go, but I don't really do it well. And then I'm at the place and then I find myself reading a lot about it later. And as a tour guide, she said, that's what you should do because then you have context for all of it. And in a lot of ways, as she said it, I thought that's just like leadership. You can read all the leadership books before you go get your first leadership job and you forget it all because the problems that come are so unique to that situation. But if you're reading the books and listening to the podcasts and reaching out to your network while you're immersed in the leadership work, it clicks.
wow, what a great connection,
Right.
Jen. And
Yeah.
you're not off the hook because I'm probably going to ask you more about Italy and gelato in
Right.
future
That's okay.
episodes because there's just so many things I'm
So
curious
many
to know. But you also wrote a post, and I believe you posted this before you were traveling, called The Problem with Certainty. And I just wanted to bring that to listeners today because I had some thoughts about that post too. We, in a recent post that you and I did, talked about some of the lessons learned this past year from working with leaders. And I think one of the quotes that I used in that conversation was that curiosity is often more important than certainty. And you had already been writing about that. And so why don't you just open up that conversation for a little bit for listeners and just let's talk about um we're not saying it's not we're not saying don't be certain, but we're saying that sometimes the process involved in asking questions and well, I'm not going to steal the thunder. You just take it there.
Right. Well, no, I think that's exactly the point, right? Certainty is not a bad thing. I want to be very clear about that. We want certainty. As humans, we want certainty. And we know that children like and need routine, and you need to know what's coming. I think about every seventh grader who ever walked into my classroom when I taught, what are we doing today? People want to know. And that is very soothing and very comforting for us as humans. But it's not. It doesn't substitute for growth. And so the reason I wrote this post, and I've told this story on the podcast, I'm sure. I listened to an interview where a musician had gone off solo, and he told the interviewer, well, it's because bandmates have girlfriends. And what he meant was there's problems that come with having others on the team or whatever. And so we don't get that luxury in leadership. We absolutely do not. Yes, it's a lot faster, less prone to mistakes, less dramatic if we work alone. But in leadership, we are literally paid to manage the chaos and move our buildings forward. And so being certain is a terrible substitute for growth. We can't insulate ourselves from other people and their genius as a way to get more certainty. That's just not going to happen. So we
Yeah.
have to embrace it.
Well, and even the idea of, because you talk about this, about the solo artist, um, believes they have total control.
Right.
But you and I both know that no matter what role you step into, if you're gonna do it in education, it's gotta involve other people, and especially in school leadership, solo is the recipe for, um, burnout. Solo is the recipe for, not stepping into the genius of others. Solo is the recipe for not discovering your own limitations and where you need to grow. So let's talk about that for a minute too, of why is tempting as it is sometimes to want to shut everybody else out when you're feeling resistance or pressure, why it's important to lean into, not away from those relationships.
Well, yeah, and think about, I'm going to answer that by flipping a question back to you. Think about a time where you really would have preferred to just do it yourself and you didn't, and you were glad you didn't. I could name 25 hiring scenarios where I
Yeah.
thought I'll
Yeah.
just interview and hire, and boy was I glad when I got the feedback, because the feedback I got from others and from taking the time to do committee interviews, I recognize the dynamics of the team and how the collective input was not only going to make us choose the right candidate, but when the candidate was hired, they knew the team, the dynamics, they understood the questions that were being asked, and then the team had buy-in. They're like, well, that's the person we wanted. So ultimately the decision is on the principal to hire, but that input matters. So that's my example.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'll give you an example from a conversation I had just this week because I met with I didn't, you know me, I try not to do PD during July, but I did give in to the request of one friend to meet with their leadership team as they were coming back together, getting ready for a new school year. And there's a lot of new members on this team. And so we were just walking through. I was um, given the privilege of just facilitating some of their conversations about what are your expectations that you guys have for working together as a team. And this was such a great conversation, Jen, because that leader who is facilitating that team could have just, um, walked that pathway with a new team and a lot of new members without this intentionality, but inviting me into that conversation meant that I was asking them to, and here's some of the questions I brought them. How do you wanna be communicating with one another regularly? How do you plan to handle disagreements among yourselves? What will accountability look like among you guys as a team? How will you ensure that every voice is being heard? What commitments do you want to make to one another on the front end that you can stay that these are going to be the norms of how you're going to be working together as you move forward? And I didn't prescribe a thing for that group conversation, Jen. But just to give an example, that's an example of recognizing that we have to lean into, man, the diversity and the differences, the patterns, the unique things that we share in common, but also the things that make us very different that help us, that complement how we work together.
well, and we all know from our time as teachers and from watching teachers how hard we work to teach that skill to kids.
Mhm.
We sometimes want kids working alone because we want to see what they know and what they can do, but many times that idea of collaboration is embedded in the content standards, right? We want that to come out of it so that people can work well together. And so as adults, it really is practicing what we preach. It really is for us saying, gather the people around you and make yourself stronger. And so that was kind of the door into this conversation about certainty, because it is so beautifully powerful when we work together and we lead with an acceptance that it's going to be messy. It's leadership is messy. Certainty is almost never guaranteed. I was thinking on my drive home today from work, we lost power today at work. And I thought, never when I woke up this morning did I have on my bingo card that we were going to need to deal with a power outage at 1:30 p.m. You know, you just don't know in leadership. But carry on we do. And in a few days, I'll forget about this power outage. It will just be another thing that we had to problem solve through.
Well, you said a quote in your post on the problem with certainty that I want to read out loud, Jen, because you know me, I read your newsletters and then I tell you what I love about them. So
I know it's a great ego
I
boost
actually
every
emailed
week.
this back to you. I was like, I love this quote. You said, "It is the understanding that while relying on others is an undeniable hassle, it is also our only true reward. We don't just need others to share the load, we need them to show us what we're capable of building when we finally stop trying to do it ourselves." And what I loved about that quote is it took me back to one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to be a real English teacher geek for a minute because I love C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia. I love J.R.R. Tolkien, who was friends with C.S. Lewis and Tolkien wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogies. And they had a mutual friend named Charles Williams. And when he died, I heard someone read this quote once from a letter that C.S. Lewis had written, and he said this, "In each of my" sorry, listeners, I'm gonna read a long quote. Here we go. But Lewis wrote this, "In each of my friends, there is something that only some other friend can fully bring out. By myself, I am not large enough to call the whole man into activity. I want other lights than my own to show all of his facets." And then he goes on to explain that now that his friend Charles is dead, he'll never see another Tolkien reaction to a specifically Charles joke, or far from having his friend Tolkien more to himself, he's going to actually have less of him. And he says this as he wraps up: "Friendship exhibits a glorious nearness by resemblance to heaven itself." And I just remember I wrote that quote down when I heard it because I just remember thinking how often we sell ourselves short by thinking that if I just pull away, if I just do it myself, if I just rely on me, because we're so obsessed with self-reliance, I think, in our culture, that I'll get more done. And the truth is there's less of you when you pull away from others. And there's actually parts of you that never get experienced until you're in the presence of others. And so, Jen, I just think that it's interesting to me that your call to this wrestle with certainty is an invitation to invite others, because sometimes we can the problem that we face when we get blinders on or we get narrow in our thinking is that we have shut out the voices of other people that can help us see things we can't see ourselves.
Right. So, a little side story. One of the most amazing places we went on this trip was Santorino, and they have a path, a switchback path that goes down to the water, and they have, oh gosh, well, I don't know, hundreds of donkeys that are lined, and you can ride one down or ride one up if you want. And so they stand there, and I chose not to walk. I chose not to ride a donkey. I chose to walk down, but these donkeys were just like everywhere. And as we're walking down with the group, one of the students I was with said, "Did you know donkeys go crazy if they're alone, if they're kept alone?" And I was like, "Oh, whatever." Well, I looked it up, and that is in fact true. Social animals need others even when they think they don't. And so donkeys are kind of known to be kind of jerks, right? And so it would be easy to think they'd be very happy out in the meadow by themselves, but they have to be paired. They require continuous companionship. And so that severe loneliness and deep depression and anxiety and behavioral changes that happen in other creatures without people, you can apply that to leadership as well. And you can say, you know what, I'm going to stave off all the negative parts about being alone, and I'm going to invite people into my leadership team to help me make better decisions.
My gosh. Well, as we wrap this up, I'm gonna just quote you one more time. because
This is so fun. I love being quoted.
because
Poor listeners.
your same post, you say certainty is a terrible substitute for growth.
Yeah.
And I just think that's such a great reminder to all of us that, man, maybe you're listening to this at the time of this recording. Maybe you're listening to it a few weeks late. Whatever it is, a lot of leaders are getting kind of stepping back in, starting to get ready for that next thing. And as you are, I just want to invite you, just like Jen and I are challenging ourselves, to lean into others in that work that you're getting ready to do, because you might be certain what needs to happen next, but I bet you're going to pivot and transition and switch a little bit when you invite other voices into what we should be doing together next. Oh my gosh, Jen. Well, how can our listeners stay connected with you in the days ahead?
Yes, absolutely. Reach out to me at my website, jenschwanke.com. And if you want to quote me as well, I'm joking, but you can subscribe to my newsletter at jenschwanke.com.
That's right. And you can find all of today's posts and some notes along with today's post on the website at williamdparker.com or at our new web address, principlematterspodcast.com. So until next time, thank you for listening and thanks for doing what matters. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.